Okay, welcome to the deep dive. You dropped a really fascinating source into our hands this time. It's this comprehensive report that takes a magnifying glass to global medical tourism, really zeroing in on where India stands compared to, the other big players. Thinking about medical travel, I mean, it's a massive world out there, kind of complex. How do you even start to cut through the noise? What makes one place truly stand out? So our mission today, using this report you shared, is to really distill the valuable insights. We want to give you the critical takeaways, maybe some surprising facts, and just that practical understanding you need if you're, considering this path. And this report, it gets straight to it, kicking off with some pretty head-turning numbers. We're talking India's medical tourism sector, valued at, $9 billion back in 2022, and projected to hit a staggering $18 billion by 2027.
It's huge.
And listen to this bit, 2 million patients from 78 different countries visiting India every year for treatment. That immediately tells you, okay, this isn't some niche thing. It's a global force.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how the source frames that scale. It's not just a number. It's presented as a market with specific strengths. And it doesn't just praise India. It does this structured head-to-head comparison against key competitors, looking at crucial things like, cost, quality, technology, and the actual patient experience. You've really handed us an insightful treasure map here with this comparative report. So we're going to guide you through its analysis, pulling out the most potent insights. We'll highlight the key distinctions, the findings the report emphasizes, and sort of connect the dots so you understand what it all means for you when you're weighing these global medical options.
So let's start there. According to the source, right in this introduction, what's the core pitch for India? What are the main reasons the report says people are actually choosing it?
Well, the report points to a combination of really powerful draws. There's this blend of high-quality healthcare, often benchmarked against international standards, paired with incredibly low cost. The source throws out that figure, 60 to 80% savings compared to Western countries, which is, that's a significant number right off the bat.
Yeah, huge savings.
Yeah.
And it's not just cost, is it? The report also mentions things like cutting-edge tech and highly trained doctors.
Precisely. Access to the latest medical tech is definitely a key point, as is the expertise of the professionals. Many, as the report notes, have international training qualifications. Plus, like you said, that widespread English proficiency among medical staff, that's a huge facilitator for international patients. Makes things much easier.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture the report's painting, these factors really form India's fundamental value proposition. The source also puts a lot of weight on accreditation as a quality indicator. It points out, 38 JCI accredited hospitals and this remarkable number, 839 NEBH accredited facilities.
Wow, 839. That's a lot.
It is. It shows a different scale. It even calls out specific cities like Chennai, often labeled India's health capital in the report. And importantly, the source notes the ease of travel, facilitated by the e-medical visa for 167 countries. And also that point that since 2019, many treatments don't even need a specific medical visa if you have, say, an appropriate alternative visa.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's unpack the real heart of this report then, the comparisons. It lines India up against Thailand, Turkey, Malaysia, Singapore, Mexico, and Costa Rica. This is where we really see the nuances the source is identifying, right?
Exactly.
Let's start with India versus Thailand. The report says Thailand's a major player.
Oh, absolutely. Thailand has this really well-established reputation, especially for integrating healthcare with, tourism. The report notes its market size is pretty substantial, 61 JCI accredited places, and it's popular for things like cosmetic surgery, dental work, fertility treatments, orthopedics, that sort of thing.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting, looking at the source's cost comparison. While both countries offer, significant savings over Western prices, the report highlights that India is often more cost-effective, particularly for the major complex procedures. The table in the source is quite telling, actually. A heart bypass in India, listed around $7,000 to $7,900, while in Thailand, it's more like $15,000.
$13,000, wow.
Yeah, that's a potential saving of 47.53% right there, according to the report's calculation. Knee replacement shows a similar pattern. India at $7,200 versus Thailand's $9,000 up to $17,200 range.
Big range there.
It is. And even IVF, it's notably cheaper in India, $3,500, $4,500 compared to Thailand's $6,000, $14,500 range. The report really emphasizes these percentage savings you get with India.
So the report's big takeaway on Thailand versus India is largely about that cost advantage for the really major stuff. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a primary distinction the source makes, definitely. But beyond price, the report does note Thailand's strengths in niches like cosmetic surgery, gender reassignment, using advanced tech. India, while also using robotic surgery and AI, seems to have, according to the report, a broader and deeper range in complex areas like cardiac surgery, organ transplants, neurosurgery.
Okay.
The source points out the accreditation numbers too. Thailand has more JCI hospitals, 61 versus India's 38. But India has that vastly larger network of NABH facilities, 839, suggests different scales, maybe different focuses in their healthcare ecosystems.
Interesting difference.
And doctors. Both countries have skilled, often internationally trained doctors. JCI accreditation is, of course, a strong quality signal for both. But India's comparative strength here, based on the report, seems to be the sheer volume and depth of expertise across a wider array of complex fields. On the patient experience side, the report credits Thailand's mature tourism infrastructure. Specific hospitals like Bumrungrad get mentioned for dedicated expat services. India, though, offers that widespread English communication, dedicated international patient desks, and the convenient e-medical visa. And here's something unique the source mentions. India's integration of AWUSH, the holistic recovery options.
Yes, Ayurveda, yoga.
Exactly, which isn't really a central part of Thailand's medical tourism package as described in the report.
So, summarizing the source's view on choosing India over Thailand.
It boils down to superior cost for major surgeries, broader and deeper expertise in complex specialties, the widespread English factor, those unique holistic wellness options, and India's established reputation for handling really intricate cases.
Okay, clear. Let's switch gears then. India versus Turkey. The report positions Turkey as rapidly ascending, a big up-and-comer in the market.
It absolutely does. The source goes into detail on Turkey's rapid growth, market size, patient numbers. It notes its popularity for things like hair transplants, cosmetic procedures, dental work, cardiology. And the report points to, 44 to 46 JCI-accredited hospitals in Turkey, so quality markers are there.
Okay. And cost-wise, how does that comparison look in the report?
Well, the report confirms Turkey offers significant savings compared to Europe or the U.S. It gives examples like a hair transplant for maybe $2,600 in Turkey versus $13,600 in the U.S. Big difference.
Yeah.
However, when comparing directly to India, the source suggests India is often cheaper than Turkey, again, particularly for the more complex procedures. The sources table shows India's heart bypass costs, $7K, $7, $9K, are generally at the lower end or maybe more consistent than Turkey's range, which is wider, $4, $8K, and $15, $10K.
Quite a range for Turkey.
Yeah, and knee replacement also tends to be cheaper in India, $7K, $7, $2K, compared to Turkey, $5 and $6K is $12K. IVF costs are noted as pretty similar, actually, around $3, $5K, $4, $7Ks in India versus $4 and $5Ks in Turkey. And hair transplants seem comparable, too.
So even against another cost-effective place like Turkey, the report suggests India often keeps an edge on price for the bigger treatments.
That seems to be the implication the source draws from the numbers, yeah.
Oh.
In terms of services and tech, Turkey's strong in areas like cosmetic, dental, ophthalmology, cardiology, boasting modern tech, JCI accreditation. India is described as similarly comprehensive, but according to the report, really excelling in those super specialties. Organ transplants, neurosurgery, advanced cancer care, also equipped with advanced technology. And while Turkey has those JCI facilities, India offers that much larger scale of the NABH network alongside its JCI hospitals.
Right, that scale difference again.
Exactly. Doctor expertise. High quality in both, many with Western training, JCI validating standards. India's doctors globally recognized, Western qualifications common, giving it that depth across a wider range of complex fields. The source does mention a potential difference in patient experience, though. While hospitals in Turkey have international wings, the report notes potential language barriers outside those areas compared to India's more widespread use of English. That could matter to some people.
That's a practical point.
And another interesting point, the source raises economic stability. It mentions high inflation in Turkey could potentially impact the cost stability of medical supplies, whereas India's economic environment, the report suggests, might offer more predictability for the treatment costs quoted.
That's not something you'd immediately think of.
Right. So bringing it back to the report's synthesis, choosing India over Turkey is presented based on potentially greater cost savings for major procedures, broader English proficiency, India's established global hub status for diverse complex treatments, the unique holistic wellness offerings, that larger scale of accredited facilities, including NABH, and possibly more stable medical costs.
Okay, comprehensive. Next up is India versus Malaysia. The report positions Malaysia as a strong Asian competitor, especially popular with patients from its own region.
Correct. The source notes Malaysia's significant market size, patient numbers, highlighting that, yes, 70–80% of its medical tourists are actually from Indonesia. Its strengths, as listed in the report, include cost savings around 30–50% less than the West, both JCI, Seven mentioned, and local MSQH accreditation, skilled English-speaking staff, and strong government backing via the Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council, or MHTC.
MHTC, right?
Yeah. And popular treatments similar to some other Asian hubs. Cardio, ortho, oncology, fertility, cosmetic procedures.
And how does the cost stack up against India, according to the report?
Well, Malaysia is clearly cheaper than the West. Against India, the report shows it's a bit more nuanced. India seems cheaper for complex cardiac procedures, heart bypass. India, $7 9 case versus Malaysia, $8K, $12 in one case. However, Malaysia can be very competitive or even slightly cheaper at the lower end for knee replacement. Their range is $6 and 6K 8 casers versus India's $7 and $7 2 case.
So pretty close on knees.
Yeah, overlaps there. And potentially for IVF too, where Malaysia's range is cited as $2 or $4 versus India's $3 and 5K, $4 and 5K. Dental costs, as usual, vary.
So the cost advantage for India isn't as clear-cut across the board against Malaysia compared to maybe Thailand or Turkey for all procedures?
The report implies it's more procedure-dependent with Malaysia. Yeah, they're particularly competitive in certain areas. For services and tech, Malaysia has a comprehensive offering. Notable strengths like cardiology. The report mentions the IJN Institute Ortho, Oncology, Fertility, using modern tech, JCM SQI accreditation. India's spectrum, as highlighted throughout the report, is just vast, particularly excelling in super specialties like organ transplantation, neurosurgery, and operating on a much larger scale. Malaysia is noted for high standards in its specific focus areas like cardio and fertility.
And the doctors and patient experience.
Doctor expertise in Malaysia. High quality, many Western-trained English-speaking physicians. Indian doctors. Globally acclaimed, many with Western qualifications offering depth across a broader range. Quality at top hospitals in both, presented as comparable. The report does highlight the MHTC and Malaysia's International Patient Centers, IPCs, as being very streamlined, offering comprehensive support from teleconsultation to visa help. That's noted as a significant plus for patient experience.
Smooth process.
Yeah. India also offers robust support, widespread English, the e-medical visa, plus its unique wellness options. But Malaysia's IPCs and MHTC structure gets a specific nod in the report for efficiency.
Okay. So the synthesis for choosing India over Malaysia, according to the source.
It focuses on potentially greater cost savings for the most complex, highly specialized procedures, a wider spectrum, and deeper expertise in super specialty treatments. The sheer scale of India's accredited hospital network, that NABH number, really stands out. The deeply integrated traditional wellness options, and India's established global recognition for handling very complex care.
This next comparison is really fascinating, especially from a cost angle. India versus Singapore. The report describes Singapore as, what, a premium destination?
Premium, exactly. And premium immediately translates to higher cost, according to this source. Singapore is consistently ranked as having world-class healthcare, no doubt. But its market size for medical tourism is smaller compared to India or Thailand, likely because of that price point. It's popular for highly specialized treatments, oncology, cardiology, orthopedics, neurology, fertility, lots of JCI-accredited hospitals.
Right.
But this is where the cost disparity the report details is just, well, it's staggering. Singapore is cheaper than the West, sure, but it's significantly more expensive than other Asian hubs. The source points out a heart bypass in Singapore is like 41% more than in Thailand and a whopping 106% more than in Malaysia.
Wow. Okay, and compared directly to India, what does the report say there?
That's the absolute key takeaway the report hammers home. The financial difference is immense. Looking at the sources table, heart bypass in India. $7K, $7 9Ks versus Singapore's $13 4Ks, $17 2 Ks. 41% to 58% saving by choosing India. Knee replacement. India, $7K, $7 2K compared to $16,000 flat in Singapore. That's a 55–56% saving.
Huge difference.
It's huge. IVF. India, $3 5Ks, $4 5 days versus Singapore, $12K, $20K. That's a massive 62–77% saving. Even dental shows huge differences, 59–84% savings in India, according to the table. The report explicitly states this overwhelming cost advantage is the primary differentiator between India and Singapore. Full stop.
So the report implies you can access perhaps a comparable level of quality, especially at India's top places, but at just a fraction of the price. Is that the...
That's the core argument the source makes, yes. Singapore excels in highly specialized treatments, cutting-edge R&D, very high overall system ranking, world-class. India also offers comprehensive advanced treatments, modern tech, and its top doctors are globally renowned. The report suggests that for many procedures, particularly the complex ones, the quality at India's leading centers can be comparable. The technology is similar, but the cost structure is just fundamentally different.
And doctors. Singapore's are world-class, right?
Undeniably world-class, often internationally trained, within a globally recognized system. India's top doctors also boast high expertise, frequently with Western training. The quality at the very top tier is presented as being able to compete, though Singapore's overall system consistently ranks higher globally. That's a distinction the report maintains.
Got it. And patient experience. Singapore must be smooth sailing there.
Oh yeah, noted for efficiency, comfort, safety, cleanliness. English is official, universally spoken in healthcare. Visa-free entry is easy for many. Sophisticated international patient services, very polished. India also provides robust support, widespread English, the e-medical visa, plus its unique wellness options. The source acknowledges Singapore's highly westernized environment might appeal to patients seeking maximum familiarity too.
Okay, so the report's conclusion for choosing India over Singapore seems almost entirely driven by the money.
Pretty much. It's the overwhelming cost advantage, 50–80% plus saving for what the report implies is comparable quality at the leading edge. Plus, India's extensive network and choice, the holistic wellness advantage, and its accessibility to a broader global patient base. Singapore is clearly positioned, according to this source, for a niche market where cost is just not the primary driver.
Right. Okay, let's move to the Western Hemisphere comparisons, India versus Mexico. The report highlights Mexico's strength, especially for North American patients, because it's just so close, right?
Proximity is absolutely key there, yeah. Especially for patients from the U.S. and Canada. The source mentions Mexico attracts over 1 million medical tourists annually, 1.2 million U.S. citizens specifically visiting in 2022. Popular areas: dental, cosmetic, bariatric, cardiology, oncology, and the report lists 8 JCI-accredited hospitals in Mexico.
And the cost picture there. Mexico's known for savings compared to the U.S.
Definitely. Mexico offers substantial savings versus the U.S. healthcare system. The report gives examples like a cardiac bypass at maybe $27,000 in Mexico versus $144,000 in the U.S. Huge difference.
Massive.
Dental, like all-on-4 implants. Around $8,000 in Mexico versus $20K, $30K in the U.S. Still great savings. However, when comparing directly to India, the report indicates India is often even more cost-effective, especially for the major surgeries. Heart bypass, India, $7K, $7.09K versus Mexico, $10 and $4K, $27K. That's a 71% saving with India. Knee replacement. India, $7K, $7.02K versus Mexico, $10, $1K, $13 and 5Ks. That's 47% savings. Even dental, where Mexico is really strong, the report shows India can be cheaper for complex work like all-on-4. India, 5K, 6K versus Mexico, 8K, 10K. That's a 25–40% saving reported there.
Okay, so Mexico offers great savings for North Americans compared to home, definitely.
Yeah.
But India can often go even further on price, particularly for the really complex procedures.
That's exactly the distinction the source makes. It also points out Mexico's model really benefits from those border cities, makes quick, accessible treatments like dental or cosmetics super convenient for nearby patients.
Right, just pop over the border.
Yeah. India's model is more centered around planned, complex medical journeys involving air travel, generally different logistics.
Makes sense. What about services and tech?
Services and tech in Mexico are developing, catering specifically to those popular procedures with North American patients, investing in JCI facilities, robotic surgery, telemedicine. India, however, the report presents as having a broader spectrum of advanced services and super specialty care, with a larger network using modern technology overall.
And doctors.
Yeah.
Mexico has U.S.-trained docs, right?
Often, yeah. High quality and accredited facilities, often U.S. training or board certification. India's doctors globally recognized, Western qualifications common, offering that broader, deeper expertise across more complex fields. Quality in accredited settings is good in both, but the range differs. The source also briefly mentions that while medical tourism zones in Mexico are generally secure, safety perceptions can sometimes be a factor for some patients considering Mexico, which isn't typically highlighted as a major concern for medical travel to India in quite the same way in this report.
Interesting nuance.
So, the source's synthesis for choosing India over Mexico, particularly for a global audience, or maybe North Americans seeking maximum benefit, includes superior cost savings for complex procedures, a broader range and depth of super specialty care, India's status as an established global hub attracting diverse patients, not solely North American, the integrated holistic healing options, and that larger network of accredited hospitals.
Okay. And finally, India versus Costa Rica, often thought of for combining like ecotourism with medical care.
Yes, exactly. The source highlights Costa Rica's unique niche, blending ecotourism with medical tourism, particularly appealing to North Americans. The report cites its revenue, patient numbers, notes its popularity for dental, cosmetic, orthopedic, and bariatric procedures. It does have fewer JCI-accredited facilities mentioned, though, only 2 or 3 listed in the source.
Pure JCI, okay. And the cost comparison, still cheaper than the U.S., presumably.
Oh, yeah. Presented as offering around 30–40% savings compared to the U.S. Basic checkups around $60, specialist visits $80, $50. Seems very reasonable. However, the source indicates India generally offers more substantial savings, again, especially for major procedures. Looking at the table, heart bypass in India, $7.09 versus Costa Rica, $13.08, $27K. That's a 71% saving with India. Big gap.
Significant.
Knee replacement. India, $7K, $7.02 versus CR, $12 of $5K, $13, $6K. Still a 49% saving. Even in dental, where CR is strong, India can be cheaper, according to the source. Dental implant. India, $418, $900 versus CR, $750, $950, 56% saving. All on 4. India, 5K, 6K versus CR, 10K, 10 part and 7K, 53% saving. The source also notes CR doesn't have widely cited IVF cost data available for comparison, unlike India. That's precisely the point the report makes, yeah. CR is positioned as a strong, regional, cost-effective option, particularly for dental and some cosmetic ortho. But India presents a more compelling financial argument across a much wider and more complex range of procedures, services, and tech in CR. Good in its top private hospitals, which are JCI accredited, focusing on its areas of strength. India, though, offers that far broader spectrum. Advanced procedures like organ transplants, complex cardiac, neuro-oncology. These aren't really CR's primary focus, according to the report. India's tech infrastructure for these advanced interventions is presented as more extensive.
And doctors' patient experience.
Doctor expertise in CR, highly trained, often U.S.-Europe qualified, English spoken in private facilities. JCI attests to quality, India's doctors. Globally recognized, Western training common, broader, deeper expertise across more complex fields. Quality in their respective areas of strength is good in both. Patient experience in CR is uniquely tied to its ecotourism. That nature-based recovery environment is a key appeal, especially for North Americans, given easy visa-free entry, often just using a tourist stamp for medical travel. English is common in tourist medical areas.
The recovery environment sounds nice.
It does. India offers extensive support, widespread English, the dedicated e-medical visa system, which the report implies is perhaps more structured for medical purposes than simply using a tourist visa for a complex procedure and its unique wellness options. So CR's draw is that easy NA access and the nature recovery blend.
Okay, so the source's synthesis for choosing India over Costa Rica.
It emphasizes greater affordability for major medical and complex dental procedures, an unmatched range of complex and super specialty treatments, a larger scale and network of advanced facilities, India's established global leader reputation, the dedicated e-medical visa system potentially being better suited for complex, longer treatments, and India's rich cultural and holistic wellness heritage.
Wow, okay. That deep dive into the comparative section really lays out the landscape the report describes. It's quite detailed. So based on all that head-to-head analysis, the source then kind of consolidates India's key strengths in its summary section, right? What are the main advantages the report wants us to walk away with?
Yeah, it pulls it all together nicely. The report lists them explicitly as the pillars of India's medical tourism appeal. First, unparalleled cost-effectiveness, just reinforcing those significant savings figures against both the West and many competitors we just talked about.
Right, the cost is huge.
Huge. Second, high quality and international accreditation. Circling back to the 38 JCI hospitals, and notably, that vast network of 839 MBBH hospitals, scale and standards. Then they highlight the expertise of medical professionals, really emphasizing their Western training frequently. The availability of advanced medical technology, listing specific examples found in India like robotic surgery or cyberknife.
Cutting-edge stuff.
Yeah. The comprehensive range of treatments covering everything from those complex organ transplants down to dental work. Just the sheer breadth. and minimal language barriers because of widespread English use.
Makes sense.
Further points include the ease of travel and visa process, specifically the e-medical visa for 167 countries, and the flexibility with other visa types mentioned earlier. Shorter waiting periods compared to many developed nations, that's a big one too.
Definitely.
Significant government support through initiatives like Heal in India, the integrated holistic healing options like AYUSH Ayurveda, yoga, which the report identifies as a really unique selling point, and finally, a growing network of medical facilitators aimed at simplifying the patient journey. And the report presents these not just as claims, but as advantages validated by those detailed comparisons we just went through.
Okay, so the report paints a very, very positive picture of India's position overall. But, as you noted earlier, it aims for a balanced view. It also addresses challenges, right? What are the potential downsides or areas for improvement the source identifies for India? It's important for you, the listener, to have that full picture.
Absolutely. And the report presents these impartially as challenges that need addressing for India's continued growth in this space. It notes potential inconsistencies in post-op care and follow-up. This seems particularly relevant once patients return to their home countries. How is that managed?
Yeah, aftercare is crucial.
Crucial. Infrastructure disparities are mentioned too, suggesting variations in quality or accessibility outside the major Tier 1 cities. Perception and trust issues are raised, acknowledging that isolated negative incidents, even if rare, can sometimes disproportionately affect the overall view of a destination.
That happens everywhere, I guess.
True. Intense international competition from all those other growing hubs we discussed is obviously a constant factor. The report points to a need for maybe a stronger regulatory framework, specifically for wellness tourism, things like Ayurveda and yoga centers, to ensure standardization and professionalism across the board.
Regulating the traditional side, too.
Yeah. Billing transparency and intermediary margins are cited as areas where you might encounter inconsistent fees or maybe high costs from middlemen sometimes. Data management and interoperability, the seamless transfer of patient records between facilities or internationally is noted as an ongoing challenge.
Tech infrastructure stuff.
Exactly. And finally, standardization of service quality beyond the purely clinical aspects. So encompassing things like hospitality standards, hygiene and ancillary services, the whole ecosystem around the medical care.
Okay.
The report is pretty clear. Addressing these challenges is vital for India to solidify its position and keep growing in the global medical tourism market.
Right. So if someone listening takes all this information, the strengths, the detailed comparisons, the challenges, and is seriously considering India for medical care, what practical steps or strategic considerations does the report recommend they actually take? What's the actionable advice here?
Well, the report's conclusion offers some direct advice based on its findings. It's quite practical. First, thorough research. Seems obvious, but crucial. Specifically, choose hospitals with NABH Endured JCI accreditation and verify the credentials of the specific medical team you'll be working with.
Due diligence, basically.
Exactly. Second, utilize reputable medical tourism facilitators. The report suggests they can provide really crucial assistance in navigating the whole process, which can be complex. Third, seek comprehensive treatment packages. This is about ensuring cost transparency upfront and trying to avoid unexpected or hidden fees later on.
Get it all in writing.
Pretty much. Fourth, plan carefully for post-operative care. Discuss follow-up options clearly with the medical team beforehand, whether that means staying longer in India or using telemedicine or coordinating with local care back home. Have a plan. And finally, understand visa requirements thoroughly. Confirm exactly what's needed beyond the standard e-medical visa based on the specific procedure and the expected duration of stay. Don't make assumptions.
Okay, that's solid practical advice. This deep dive into the source material you provided has been incredibly insightful, really. The report makes a very compelling case for India's position in the global medical tourism landscape, especially, it seems, when it comes to those complex, high-value procedures. It lays out a strong argument for this unique combination of world-class care and, well, truly unparalleled affordability compared to so many other global options.
It really does. And while the challenges the report notes are important considerations, absolutely, it also highlights India's distinctive strengths, particularly that integration of modern medicine with traditional wellness practices. That creates an offering you really don't find elsewhere on this kind of scale. It's quite unique.
Well, thank you again for sharing such a fascinating and detailed document for this deep dive. Really appreciate you sending it over.
My pleasure. And this leaves us with maybe a final thought to ponder, drawn directly from the implications of this report's comparisons. When you look at those vast differences in cost and the range of services presented, particularly comparing India to places like Singapore or even Mexico and Costa Rica, does this report maybe challenge your initial ideas about what value truly means in healthcare when you start considering your options internationally? What goes into that equation?
Value in healthcare. Definitely something to think about. Until the next deep dive into listener-provided source material.